Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jason Sower. I'm an attorney with Kelly Cronenberg. I'm here on behalf of the Rising Leaders Committee of the firm with Judge Evans of the 17th Judicial Circuit of Florida here in Broward County. Good afternoon, Judge. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you and uh, looking forward to this interview here. I'll get right into it. We're all busy. Judge, if you could please introduce yourself, briefly tell me and everyone about your background.
Well, I grew up not far from here, actually. I'm in the downtown courthouse. So my first elementary school was Walker Elementary, and I grew up on the other side of Sistrunk in an area known as Tatertown. So if you know about the area, you know about the area. If you don't, you can Google it. But at the time, there was a lot of adversity that I had overcome at the time, but it didn't seem, it kind of seemed normal at the time. But I watched a lot of my friends make decisions in life that I could kind of see they weren't headed toward the right path. I could see past step A and step B, and I saw what it was leading to. And I tried to talk to them. And a lot of my friends, wound up in criminal courts. I'm sitting in my courtroom right now, and I'm looking over, and I can envision the people I grew up with sitting and put in chairs similar to that. Not quite as nice as it was in the old building, I remember. But those images stuck with me for a long time. And it was just one of those things where I could hear them come back and talk about everyone in the courtroom, their attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges, the bailiffs, and there was always this skewed slant about the system. And I tried to impress upon my friends, maybe they want to make better choices, but it was always about the system. And I said, you know what? I wanted to change the narrative on the subject. So at 9, I decided I wanted to be a judge. And it was very unusual for someone at 9, especially given where I was growing up. But when I was 10, I was homeless. So we lost that very first house. And after we lost the house, we moved in with a neighbor, and then another neighbor, and then another neighbor. And pretty much whoever would take us in. But you can only be homeless for so long and borrowing from so long before you are at your welcome. Also, a lot of people know that my parents are educators, but what people don't know is that you can only be use a temporary address for so long before you're removed or disenrolled from school, or before certain calls are made and certain agencies get involved. So I was removed from school in 4th grade, and I did homeschool for the end of 4th grade, and I tumbled around. I did homeschool while being homeless. So the church I was in when we tumbled into Dade County referred us to a shelter, and I lived there through my 11th Christmas. And my birthday's in January, so we moved out just before my birthday because I told my mother that I heard that we were going to get separated if I turned 12. So I made sure that we got out of there. And for me, it was one of those things where every obstacle I overcame was something that I used to drive me forward. So being homeless is temporary unless you allow it to be permanent. I know there are a lot of reasons why people are homeless, and this is my Monday docket. Many of the people who come before me on Mondays are homeless, and it is a connection that sometimes they have when they start to talk about what they can't have and what they can't do, and then I start talking about the services that are available, and they want to know how I know these things. It's because my family depended on these services for a significant period of my life. So that cycle of loss didn't stop in high school. Well, at the age of 12, I lost, out of that first group of friends that I had, I lost all of them except for 2 that are in prison. So the 3 living are myself and 2 that are in prison. The others passed away before reaching the age of 18. That path kind of followed me in different cities that I lived in Dade County as well. And I just made that decision that I'm going to keep going forward on this path. And I knew where I wanted to be. And if I could inspire others to reach for a positive path, I always had a hand reaching back towards the next generation, but I always had a path extended, another hand extended, because there were people that were reaching to help me and lift me up. My sixth grade teacher, for instance, saw something special in me in 1988 on the first day of class. And she recalled that, and she told that story just before she passed at the age of 100. In her will, I was designated to speak at her funeral and sit shiva with her family. I don't speak Hebrew, but I did my best to wing it. And but it was really important to her that I be part of that. The first person I interned for when I was 17 years old gave me this statue of Themis when I passed the bar, but also introduced me to my wife when I was 33 years of age. So, you know, I had those positive influences that were there. It may not have been right in front of me, and I may have had a lot of negativity around me, but I could always search out those positive influences in my life. And when I got to the courthouse, it was an amazing feeling because I got to see people from all walks of life and what they could achieve and what they had achieved, and they inspired me. And just to give you an example, the very first neighborhood I lived in the very first elementary school I went to, Judge Williams, Elijah Williams, he actually went to my first elementary school. Now, there's a little bit of an age gap between us, but to me, it spoke volumes that someone from that school could do it. And someone who started off just like I started off could do it. So it pushed me even harder. And, you know, that shelter I used to live at, I've been giving gifts every Christmas since I was 18. But when I became a judge in 2014, I was able to give gifts to all the kids. I got excited, and I've been doing that every year since. And now I take my wife and my daughter with me. And my wife is a social worker, and you know, so public service is in my family. And this whole system was something that I wanted to change the narrative, because I've heard so much negativity from either the community or as an attorney. I remember every experience that I had as an attorney, every experience I had watching my friends, and I knew what I didn't want to be, what I didn't want to do. So I treat everybody with respect when they come in the courtroom, because I believe that's part of my job. This isn't my courtroom. I serve here. For me, and the best way I can explain it is for the legal system to work properly, every person, and I do mean every person involved in it, must do their role and do it well. So that includes the attorneys, that includes the bailiffs, that includes the clerks, it includes everyone. I'm including the cleaning staff, because I've seen verdicts overturned because something was left on a board because of what was on the board from a previous jury, and a jury saw something they shouldn't have. So I don't, when I hear the vacuum at a certain hour, sometimes that prompts me to pack my stuff up and leave, because I know the impact it's going to have on that person on the cleaning staff. But it's because of those experiences that I had growing up, and then now seeing from this vantage how everything kind of comes together. It's kind of symbiotic, where we all kind of make this thing work. Everyone has a different role, and I understand that. But for me, I'm truly appreciative to be in the role that I'm in now. It's all I've wanted to do since I was 9 years old, and it was. When I first took the bench, I described it as the only way I could. It was the same feeling I had the first time I looked into my wife's eyes. So, and then I became a father a year after taking the bench. A year and 3 days after taking the bench, I became a father. So it's all of the great things in my life kind of happened one after the other. So I may have had a lot of adversity, more than most, and more than most who wear the robe, but um, the great things in my life all kind of snowballed around that first step.
That's amazing. I didn't know a lot of that. That is amazing, Judge, and it's really inspiring. I got to ask you, you just said something. When you became a father, did that change? That also recently happened to me. Did that change your perspective and maybe give you even more of a drive and mission in your role as a judge now? Did that impact anything for you?
Well, the biggest thing it did for me is when I found out and going out, and I've done a lot of the community service work, the same kind of thing I do now, I did before I was a judge, but for one reason or another, your voice seems to be magnified when you have a title. And now I seem to be able to reach more people. And now that I can reach more people, I look to those people that I reach and I tell those, especially kids, I love speaking to kids, and I try to inspire them so that they can in turn turn around and inspire my daughter. I don't want her to look up to me. I want her to look up to the generation that comes after me. So because I met my wife a little later, I'm the old guy in daycare, and now going to be the old one dropping his daughter off for the first day of school. But because of that, it really changed my perspective. It really pushed me to want to do right by this generation because they will be the leaders that follow me, and she will look up to them.
Great. Getting back to your journey about, obviously, you spoke before about when you discovered you wanted to be a judge and then obviously inherently go to law school. Did anything go into about your decision of where to go to law school, and was that right after college?
Um, the first place I knew I wanted to go to school was Michigan. I went to Michigan for undergrad, and that was because, well, it was twofold. One, my late grandfather was a huge Wolverine, so he loved everything about the University of Michigan. I used to watch Michigan sports with him, and I left to Michigan, only school I applied to, and I got there, and I think it was October, I realized I'm not made for cold weather. So I wanted to come back home. And my sixth grade teacher, and when I say everything kind of comes full circle, she had a great friend, and that just happened to be Nova's namesake, Shepherd Broad. He helped her get her first house through her husband's GI Bill. She helped him get elected into office and to remain in office. So they were very close. So she mentioned the school to me at a very early age. And then that first person I interned for, who gave me the statue, she was a Nova alum. Even when I was applying to be a judge, one of her classmates was on my JNC. So there were a lot of people, and I knew that I wanted to be back in Broward. Broward, to me, I felt like a tumbleweed, and I felt like a plant that had been uprooted, and my roots felt like they belonged back here. And that was a conscious choice. I wanted to be back in Broward. And when I applied to Nova, when I got accepted, I was accepted to other schools too, but I wanted to be back home. And I've never left Broward County since enrolling in Nova. That was just kind of a welcome home for me. And I've never lived in an apartment or anywhere since then that wasn't in Broward County.
Wow, that's really, what a small world. That's interesting. And I know we have a lot of Nova grads here at the firm, but going back to the namesake of the law school and the history, that's very interesting. And let me ask you this: what, in your experience, now you've been a judge and you're very actively engaged in the community, in addition to your judicial roles, we always see you out there, obviously pre-COVID a lot more, but now it's starting to get back out in person. What do you think, in your experience and your travels, makes a good leader?
First, you have to learn how to listen. You have to learn how to follow before you can lead. So for me, what made me really good and prepared for this role was everything that led up to it. So knowing what the people who are charged with crimes, what they've gone through or what they're going through, what the victims of crimes go through, seeing that firsthand. So in the criminal division, it's a tremendous asset. But in civil, I mean, we've all experienced the things that people on both sides go through. So all you have to do really is to pay attention. And in this capacity, we're no longer advocates. Any person who is that passionate advocate, it's really hard to find that balance because you don't advocate from the bench. So it's more about listening. And if you can do that and give everyone a fair trial and ensure that justice and that's why I put the statue in front of me, because it always comes first. So if you can listen and make sure that justice and that the law comes first, then I think that this is a great place to be. But you have to learn how to listen to the people, listen to the community before you can lead them in any capacity.
So, and to just step on that, what advice you have, I know we've spoken on leadership for young lawyers. And just to let you know, obviously, part of what this interview is about is helping some young lawyers around the community, in our firm and in other places. What advice do you have for young lawyers just starting out or maybe in their first few years of practice?
Well, the first thing is that I can't say every judge does it, but I know that there are quite a few who do. I know it was done for me, so I do it in return. But a lot of judges, after a trial's over, and obviously after all appellate periods are done, I'm willing to speak to both sides and let them know what they did right and what they did wrong, how they can improve. And those kinds of tips are invaluable. And they help me get better as an attorney. So don't be afraid to ask. I know that as long as both sides are there, there's a lot of the judiciary there, they're willing to help. Join voluntary organizations because it helps you get connected to the community. So I'm not saying one organization, there are so many and they'll connect you to different areas. And especially when you're focusing in one particular area of law. So you really want to get to know the community, and to get the pulse of the community, you need to be involved in those organizations. And never shy away from a trial, or never shy away from seeking that experience. So I did 6 jury trials as an intern when I did my CLI. I didn't know that was a lot until after I realized that many people had done 6 jury trials before they were promoted to felony. But as a new attorney, always speak to the people who've come before you. Speak to ones who've done this, but the big thing I will caution is don't walk in unprepared. If you have a question, research your issue. Look at your issue and start off by talking to someone about what you've done when you hit that brick wall and you couldn't get past it. And when people see that you're not just trying to have them solve your problems for you, they're more willing to help. So that's within your own firm, that's within the legal community. Obviously, judges, we can't give advice on those kinds of things because we can't help one side or the other. But after trials, I love to talk to them about voir dire, about why they ask certain questions. So it's a great thing that once you go to trial and you see the attorneys who've done this before, and I can tell you that any attorney I've tried a case against, I look forward to those who were much better than I was. And it's because they kept me up at night, because I wanted to feel like I belonged in that room with them. And, I may know in my head that, their experience was far superior to mine, but I was hungry and I never stopped being hungry. So coming from where I came from and growing up how I grew up, I didn't take anything for granted. That attorney who I looked up to or I held in high esteem, I stayed up the entire night preparing several nights in a row, just so I was ready. And I shocked a lot of them. And a lot of them are friends, and um, they really are proud of me now, and to see what I've accomplished. But it's sad that sometimes I speak their names and people don't know, and they don't remember the impact that they made. But their impact is felt through me. And, that's why I said it's not just an individual, the practice of law is not an individual sport at all. It's all of us working together. So you definitely will learn a lot from those who've done this before. Steel sharpens steel. And the people who've had those years of practice, they're great sounding boards. They don't want to see you fail. And the other thing I would always tell young attorneys, never forget the oath you took. Everyone is excited the day you take that oath. You pass the bar, and it's everyone's celebrating, but they're not just words on paper. I went above and beyond to make sure that I wasn't the cause of any negative behavior or any negative comments that were out there about lawyers, because I knew how the public, they portrayed us. And, for every lawyer joke I ever heard, I cringed. I still cringe. It's a mark on the profession. So the civility clause was not part of the oath I took, but I carried myself and conducted myself in a manner that it wasn't necessary. But now that it's there, I remind young lawyers, read it. It's there for a reason. It was placed there for a reason. I'll take responsibility, because my generation, I include myself in the generations of attorneys that created the need for it. So I'm not going to shirk my responsibility to them and say, you know what, I was perfect. No, I'm part of a group of attorneys that created a need. The need is there, it's reflected in the oath you took. And in the courtroom I serve in, I have a copy at the podium, at both council tables, just to remind young attorneys and even seasoned attorneys to the oath that they've taken. So many people will start an argument, and they'll look down briefly, and they realize that what they were about to say doesn't comply with what they have sworn to uphold. And like I said, I put this in front of me because I sit behind it. It's a constant reminder of where we stand in this. So always put the law first, and know that you can be a zealous advocate without breaking those true core values.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. That's a great stat. One day I'm hoping to get one just like that. That is unbelievable. Let me ask you, staying on the advice route, what advice do you have for people who may want to get involved in public service, apply for a nomination to be a judge, run for something? You've been very successful at a very young age. What advice do you have for people who have that in mind?
I think you broke up for a minute.
Sorry. Now, so you've been very successful at a very young age. What advice do you have for people who want to get involved in public service, want to run for something or get appointed to be a judge, possibly?
Well, like I started off knowing why, know why and what your purpose is, what drives you. And when you channel into what drives you, for me, I mean, obviously it started off with my background, but everything I did built upon that. And every decision I made kind of pushed me in this direction and propelled me in this direction. So that's what my childhood started. It fanned the flames. But everything I did, I mean, I was the youngest person to lead my church youth group. At the age of 12, I was giving orders to people who were 18. I took leadership roles in several organizations in high school. If it's your drive, it's your passion, you need to know what brought you there, what is once you identify that, that will always be what pushes you. And when you face those challenging days, it'll be what keeps you going. So don't be afraid to reach out on faith, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. Public service is not what you think it is. Some people think it's glorious to have a title. And while that may be, there's a lot of hard work that comes from it. And you need to truly appreciate the role that you seek. So everyone does this for a different reason. Everyone does every position for a different reason. So as long as they're altruistic, I mean, public service isn't where you go to make money. It's, it's the civil firms, it's the private firms. That private sector is where you make money. When you choose public service, you're choosing it for a reason. So for me, once I decided to go out and start acting upon it, it was actually Judge Williams who reminded me just before he performed my wedding. He asked me, he said, I've seen you try, I don't know how many cases, and you've got a stellar reputation in the community. What do you want to do? And I'd never spoken it out loud since I had a high school essay returned back to me that, what do you want to be when you grow up essay? And I said that I wanted to be a judge, and it had been returned to me, and I was told to write something realistic that I could attain. So I had a 0 until I went for the rewrite, but I refused to rewrite it, and I went to the principal. The principal made sure that the grade was reflective of the work, and I got an A. But I didn't speak my goal out loud for a long time. I felt like I wanted to be ready where my record spoke for itself, where my work spoke for itself, in the courtroom and in the community. And when I didn't realize it had until I started speaking to people that I tried cases against and realizing how much respect they had for me. So Judge Williams, when he agreed to perform my wedding and asked that question, and when I told him, he said that, he refused to do my wedding until I started making moves towards attaining my goal. And he told my wife, her challenge was to make sure that I did that. She accepted the challenge. For this position, you know what the requirements are, but not just the minimum. Know what is going to be asked of you, and know what the role is, what it entails. And if you can embody that, be everything you believe that position should be, not just do it on a whim or because you want a title, then it's a phenomenal experience. For me, once I went out there, I mean, when I applied several times, and I got told no several times. They asked me, how often are we going to see you? I said, you'll see my face every time there's an opening. And they said, that's a little presumptuous, don't you think? I said, what's presumptuous about it? And they told me, they said, how do you think you're going to get an interview every single time? And I said, I never said I was going to get an interview. I know that when you interview people, you ask for applications. In the applications, there are packets. On the cover of the packet is the face of every applicant. So I said, you will see my face every time there's an opening. I never said you give me an interview. And it took them a second to realize that I don't look one step in front of me. I look several steps ahead of me. And it made them take a second look at me. So once you make that decision that that's what's for you, you push forward. You let that drive that you have, whatever puts you in position to seek it in the first place, to let it drive you, let it push you, but don't stop. And for me, it was just one of those things where I was going to keep trying until I set a record in terms of the number of times I tried. I know the record holder, and he's a federal judge now, but I told him I would break his record if I had to. And actually, the day that I was successful, I had actually had that conversation with him that morning. So, but then after I got here, I was challenged. So it was a completely different animal altogether. But I'm not afraid of work. So I was up and down, from the top of the county to the bottom, to the east to the west. But it made me stronger as an individual. It also introduced a whole lot of people to me who ordinarily wouldn't have known me. And now I have a whole lot more people who really believe in me and support me because they just got to know me and they got to know what's the motivator behind me, what drives me. And once they realize that there are so many things and so many people that have influenced me, and some of my influences may not be typical for someone like me. It really caught a lot of people by surprise. And, it's one of those things where I encourage people to do it, not just this, but any other public service job, because they truly want to embody what the very best of that position would entail. So there's no magic year, there's no magic number of years you have to serve, or where I say that you're good enough or you're prepared, but but just make sure the reason that you put in, or you try, or you run is altruistic. Make sure it embodies the position that you wish to embrace.
That's interesting. I didn't know that part of your background either. And persistency, I've heard, is a big part of the process. And it's not how many times you fall, but how many times you get up. And one last question, because I know I've taken up a lot of your time, and be brief about it. There's a big emphasis on mental health in our legal community and in the community overall. Anything that you do in particular to manage your own and keep things keep sane in our crazy world?
Well, for myself, I'll start off with, for work, it's the wonderful thing is that my major in undergrad was psychology. So that was where I got my start. I also drove myself to be placed in a position when I was with the state attorney's office years ago to be the only person that went through the same training that the forensic psychologists go through, that on the wheel for appointment. And I wanted to see it from that aspect. When I wanted to know what a juror thinks, I started running a jury because it's one of the greatest things you can do is serve on a jury. So for me, diving into that, it helped me quite a bit. But now it's just about family. I mean, what most people don't know is lately, throughout the pandemic, I probably lost more family members than my colleagues combined. So just in my family, if you add up the losses in this building, just from what people have shared, I've lost more than they have combined. So what keeps me going is purpose. It's family. And my daughter is so proud to be my daughter. And I love that. My wife is proud to be my wife. But I have family members who they're my elders, but they look up to me. When my father passed in 2016, he was the patriarch of the family, essentially. So they love to see my achievements. They love to see things like this, things that I do in the community. So whenever I do something in the community, I always make sure I send them a photograph or a link or something. And one of my cousins can share it with their parents. And, it's one of those things that it makes what I do connect to those who I love. And it always keeps me going. So, and if you have ever met my daughter, you know that it's kind of hard to have a bad day around her. But she's, first thing in the morning, last thing at night. And my wife is definitely my rock. They say behind every great man is a great woman, and she's not behind me. She's beside me. I'm just as proud of her accomplishments as she is of mine. The person who gave this to me knew her in her field independently and watched us both grow independently, and then decided when we both reached a certain point that we had to meet. So when I became a judge, I was the youngest judge in Broward County. But for me, again, it balanced out with becoming a father at a later age than I anticipated, and a husband at a later age. So I let work consume me for a little while. I'm still working on finding the balance. And if you find it, please let me know where it is. But it's always about looking for that balance. So again, just know yourself and know what drives you, what motivates you, and but also what brings you joy at the end of the day. For me, waking up to my family brings me joy. Coming into this building and being able to serve, it brings me joy. I mean, even during a pandemic where, you know, we've got masks, and it may have changed how we do things. Even Zoom changed how we do things, but we all, as a legal community, got it done, because that's what lawyers do. That's what the practice of law is. The law doesn't stop. It's not stagnant. It grows. It lives. It breathes. So we have to as well. And that's one of the things that's the beautiful thing about the practice of law, is you have to learn to adapt. It's constantly adapting. So just when you feel you're comfortable, the law changes. So, and I look forward to being able to serve in a different courtroom, a different type of law at some point, just to change things up, because I don't want to get too comfortable at any stage. But that's the great thing about becoming a judge at the age of 37. Now, I'm closing in on 45. It's one of those things that really keeps me going. So there won't be one day where I sit on this bench and I think, you know what, I don't want to be here, or I'm having a bad day. No, this is part of what drives me. This is part of what makes me want to be. This is a 9-year-old boy looking at his childhood dream and living it. So for my personal mental health, is I can't help but smile. I smile when I get here. I smile when I go home. I smile when I wake up. So just sitting at this desk and speaking to people and listening to legal arguments, really good ones, just, it excites me. And especially when I hear well-founded arguments by young attorneys, knowing the work they put in. And if I've given them a piece of advice and they've listened and I can see that improvement, I love to hear it. And I love to hear the attorneys who practice before me come back and talk to me, because I get to see their improvement, and I am so proud of each and every one of them on both sides of the aisle. And it's a wonderful thing. We're all connected in the whole practice. So I'm just honored to do my part.
That's fantastic, and so great to hear. And it's just great to have that in Broward County here. And Judge, you've been so generous with your time and going on over 40 minutes. The firm, Kelly Cronenberg, really appreciates it. We wish you health and continued success, and we're so appreciative of your time today. And we'll make sure you get a copy of this Zoom meeting when it's all done and edited.
All right.
Hey, have a great day and stay safe out there. Thanks again.
Of course, again, good seeing you again.
Yes, great. I hope to see you in person soon.
Yep. Talk to Mr. Mara. He can arrange that.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Take care.